Welcome to this week's piece. I picked up this little dresser off of Marketplace. It's super cute. I pick these styles up all the time just because they're small. They're easier for people to get in and out of vehicles. And they're just very sweet. They fit in a lot of spaces. I didn't know when I picked this up the ordeal that it was going to be. It had, if I am remembering correctly now, I may have been traumatized, like over 6 layers of paint on this thing. And not smooth, easy paints. A lot of really thick, latexy type paints. And unfortunately, I have to use Citrus Strip. Mind you, I don't have to use Citrus Strip. I just feel better about it when I'm growing a human. And it is like my least favorite stripper. It takes forever. I just really like my Jasco stuff. I feel like it works so much better, but it is super stinky and it's too cold to work outside. So Citrus Strip is where we're at. This first coat, I'm just doing a test on it. So I'm putting it on, kind of giving it some time by going through the drawers, removing the hardware, just kind of doing other tasks to see how much I can get through. And yeah, it wasn't great. So anyways, on those drawers, I was just showing you that they had escutcheons fully painted into the piece, and also the keyholes were not there. So we're gonna have to figure out what's going on with those. Of course, once we get the paint off of it. Okay, so this was the first trial just to kind of see how well this was going to work and how long it was going to take. And this is when I realized that I am going to maybe be here for the rest of my life. So this took off the very top layer of brown paint. You can see there's 2 different brown paints for the beginning stages of this. It did take off the first coat. And so now I just know that every time I do a layer of this, and I had to do a ton of layers, I have to wrap it in plastic and leave it overnight. And even that only gives me about 1 layer at a time, if that. So you can just imagine how many days this took, because obviously my shop is cold and I'm not just going to sit there and twiddle my thumbs while I'm waiting for it. I will say that after coming in the next morning, it was kind of fun lifting up the plastic and having it remove like that next layer of brown paint. However, that meant that all that kind of work was done. I scraped up as much as I could that was still down, and then again I just had to do the same procedure over and over until I got as much paint off as I could. As you can see, I did the drawers as well, just because I could get them out and flat. I like to keep the piece kind of as I was working on it. I would flip it on its side when I was ready to do the sides. I only stripped one side, but I'll show you what we did to the other side. Down to these layers, it just was barely working at all. It wouldn't peel up like it did on the first layers, and that's just because there were so many layers exposed, and obviously they don't come off in a smooth, clean sheet like the first go round. And so it's just going in and scraping up little bits. I ended up taking one of my chisels, and this is a do at your own risk. I do not condone this to anyone who doesn't just use chisels in general. You have to keep it at the right angle. You have to make sure that you're not gouging your wood. There's just a lot of things that can happen if you're using a chisel like this. Just be careful if you so choose, but I was just kind of over it. And I use chisels rather frequently, so I wasn't too worried about damaging the top. Also, this top was already damaged. It already had a ton of burn marks. This is just a piece of plywood. It's not like even a veneered piece of wood. It is just plywood. There were already spots that you could see had the layers from the underneath coming up, and there was a lot of damage to it. So at this point, I wasn't terribly worried about doing any more damage to it that was already done. I just wanted to get the paint off so that I had a smooth surface so that I could then put more paint on. Initially, I had obviously wanted to have this be a wood top, but after, especially along the edges, you can just see all the layers, all the plies, and like I said, the top had burn marks and some staining, and everything was just already taking so long anyways. There's no way to get everything back to good. I would have to re-veneer this or completely replace the top if I wanted to keep it wood. So I was just like, well, we're just going to give us a smooth surface and we're going to paint it. Sanding also took quite a bit just because the paint just never came all the way off. And I was running out of patience. So I'm just sanding everything, all the drawer sides, drawer slides, fronts, backs, all the parts. The whole dresser is getting sanded just so that I have a smooth surface, because as you saw, the paint just kept getting layered and layered and layered over top of itself. Nobody ever kind of removed and tried to get a good surface. So I just want to make sure that this is going to be a good surface for my finished product. Here I just have out my little keys and I'm testing to see which ones will actually work on this. That little baby key was the one that worked, so interesting. So on one of the sides, I decided to try my paint eater. I have yet to use this. It has been in my shop for it's been in my shop for like a year because my husband got it for me for Christmas last year. I've wanted to try this, but it needs a piece that has like this much paint on it. And you would never want to do this to veneer because this thing is, it is a paint eater and it will destroy your wood if you're not careful. It's not smooth like a sander. The abrasive pad is very hard. Kind of like a pumice is the closest I can think to explain it. So you'd never want to use this on any veneer ever, even if it had a ton of paint on it. I still wouldn't use this on veneer. But I knew these legs were solid, and I just wanted to test this out, and I was already just so upset about the amount of paint on this piece. This is an outside toy. My sander gets hooked up to a machine and there's like no dust at all, where this thing creates dust. You can kind of see some floating in the air. However, it also creates a spray of paint chips because it's like flaking off these huge chips of paint as well. So it is messy. Needless to say, I only did this one side because I was like, that's just too much for me. So that thing works great. However, it has its own unique, situations where you would use it. And it would be few and far between, I should say. So now I'm just going to remove the top just because, again, there was so much paint everywhere. It's going to be easier for me to get to everything and really remove all the other paint if I can get this top off and be able to access the underside of it and the lip. So it's just going to be easier this way. So the top had screws, which is pretty typical, but it also had glue blocks with hide glue. So I'm going through and using a scraper and I'm just scraping up all the old bits of hide glue and any larger pieces of paint that I can get up with the scraper. Of course, some of the stripper was still stuck under there, so I got rid of all that. And then I'm going to go through and sand everything smooth. So this whole bottom underside is getting sanded. And then anywhere else I can reach my sander at this point, I'm getting in there and trying to smooth everything out. At this point, I really needed a break from sanding and stripping paint off and having anything to do with paint, that I decided to work on the 2 upper small drawers, because this is where I knew I wanted to try out my hand at wood burning on furniture. So I printed this sheet off the internet, and I'm just taking inspiration from it. So I use carbon paper and I trace over certain flowers, and I kind of move it around to where it looks not exactly like the paper, obviously. This is actually one of, I can't remember who does it, but I'm pretty sure this is either like a decoupage paper or a transfer or something like that somebody does. But it's very pretty, and I just really love the flowers on it. I obviously don't need anything to be decoupaged or transferred, but I love this, and I think it's really great that you can pull inspiration from like other situations. So again, I just used carbon paper, transferred the parts that I liked, the elements that I liked, and it's just a rough transfer. You can see it's missing lines. Things are looking a little crazy. That doesn't matter, because you're only going to burn in what you want. And you only do kind of outlines or things that you may want, and then once you're finished, you can burn in the outlines, and then you'll go back and do all of your shading. So this was actually a fairly quick process, and it is super relaxing. If you've been watching any of my shorts that I've been doing, because I'm just so in love with this machine, I can't tell you how much fun it is. It's just like doing the grown-up coloring books, where it's calming, relaxing. You just sit there and make something pretty, and you don't have to move a lot. It's so fun watching everything come together. I'm just really thankful that Vevor sent me this machine, because I'd been wanting to try my hand at it for a while, but I mean, I didn't figure I'd ever actually use it, but man, I'm using it a lot, and I'm finding all kinds of things to do with it. So this is super cool. And it's way easier than I thought it was going to be. All right, back to the top. I'm going to get that back on. As you can see, like I said earlier, they used hide glue, which is what I will also use to put the top back on, because it can be rebonded. It doesn't break the wood when you want to break it apart. That's why they use it on a lot of these older dressers. And on this, I was trying to show you, they had filled up the keyholes with some kind of mud, putty, I don't know. So the first one I already have scraped out, and this one I am working to scrape it out also. Again, when I got this, the escutcheons were fully painted in, and there was just paint over the top of everything, and I couldn't tell what was going on. So here I was just I got the first drawer done. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get it working again, because it was just filled with whatever filler they used. And on this one, it was a little more disappointing, because the actual pin in the lock is missing. So it still works, but you have to hold the key perfectly to make it work. So essentially, it has 3 locks. 2 of them work great, and this one is subpar because it's missing the pin that comes out for the barrel key to go around. And then the 2 top drawers, I'm giving it a light stain because there was already staining in it. I didn't want these dark, but I did want to kind of hide some of the stains that were on the top drawers. And then also there's the old hardware holes that they again filled with white putty. And so those I will touch up with a stain also. First, I just smooth on the stain. I did 2 coats of this. And then I took a little paintbrush and touched up with the stain and the paintbrush on the little on the little holes that were filled with the white putty. So it's not perfect. I'll probably have to go in with a couple other colors to really, really hide them, but I mean, there's not much else I could do about it. They were there, they were filled, and I wanted to have wood on this, so. Well, I was gonna go this route. But then I feel like this is floral. This is not so much as more Baroque. These are different florals, but I just love them, and I think the tiny ones suit it well. And I was gonna go dark gray with this because I thought it would help make these stand out, but now I'm kind of wanting to do a lighter palette because we're coming into spring, so I think I'm gonna go with this. I feel like it's my tried and true. So I get asked this a lot, what do I apply my wallpaper with? A lot of times it's what my decoupage is with, whatever. I almost always use a poly of some kind. Kind of whatever I'm using on the piece. Sometimes it's something different. It just kind of depends on how I feel. However, this wallpaper in particular has a great adhesive on the back that you just have to get wet, and it's a really thick adhesive once it's set up. And this is going to be inset inside these panels, so I wasn't worried about using poly on this. Usually I will use poly instead of water, and the poly will activate the glue, and so it has poly and glue holding this stuff on, and it never comes off. But again, I wasn't worried about it. This has a great adhesive, and it's going to be inset, so none of the edges will be sticking out. So all I have to do is make sure that all the glue gets the water absorbed into it, and it will turn into like this weird thick gel stuff, and it works perfectly. So I got it cut out to, you know, the basic shape, used a blade to get the rest of it cut out perfectly, and then I just go through, make sure all my edges are laid down, smooth it out with my hands, and then I have a little rag in my hand that helps me push out everything else. So as it's pushing out the edges, I can kind of use the rag to clean up any excess glue. And then I just sped through this because, it's just boring to watch somebody paint white. And that's all I did. I did 2 coats of white here, all over the entire thing. And then I noticed that I had a little bit of bleed through, not a ton, just like, I want to say 2 little spots on the top. I had none on any of the carcass, just the top. And it was like, one was like a blue spot from like a pen maybe. And another one had like a little bit of yellowing. So I wasn't worried about having to do a primer or anything. I just finished out what I was doing, and then I knew once it dried, I would go in with a top coat, seal it with that, and then I'd be fine. So before I did the top coat, I just did light sand. I like to do this in between all my coats, especially if I'm brushing on a solid color, because it gets rid of most of your brush strokes. You're still going to have some, but it's not as aggressive as if you don't sand in between. Plus it makes the top coats go on so smooth. So the one that I'm using for the blocking is this exterior dead flat varnish. I'm doing this just because it's matte and I don't want to transition from a shiny to a matte between the paints and everything. So this is going to, and I'm putting it everywhere. I didn't have any other bleed through, like I said, but I'm just making sure everything is all the same. So thus far I have 2 coats of white. I'm doing this. It's going to be my stain blocker, and then I will go in with another coat of white, which I don't show because again it's boring. So it will have 3 total coats of white, and then I'm going to go ahead and seal it with my final top coat. So for my final coat, I decided to go with gloss, which is this one. It's great, and I just felt like it kind of needed it because, I don't know, white is just, it's a little bit boring, you know? And so I think the gloss really kind of amps it up a bit. And of course it was time for hardware, so I went through and put all the escutcheons back on and then swapped out the old hardware for some new teardrop ones, which were just lovely. And I honestly think that those like made the piece stand out, because I thought the white was going to be just too white, too stark everywhere, but as soon as I put those all the hardware pieces on, I just loved it. I fell in love. Real quick, I have these countersink bits. So my screws were just not quite long enough to go through the drawer. So I'm just bringing the collar down on these. I'm not drilling the hole any bigger. I'm just making a kind of a sinkhole around where the head of the screw goes in so that it pops the screw out just a little bit further so I can get my hardware on. Oh hi, Taryn here with Elegant Upgrades, and we've got our finished piece. It's a darling little thing. It's actually turned out much better than I thought. I am still going to do, I didn't wax the drawer glides yet because I am still going to do something to the sides of the drawer. I was having a bit of an issue deciding on if this was going to be enough or if I was going to have to paint a scene on here or do something. I just wasn't sure because I have the two drawer fronts which have the florals. Of course, we've got the side panels, and then I felt like that would be enough for the piece, but then just looking at it, I was worried about the white just being too glaringly white, if you know what I mean. But I actually think it looks really good, and I love this new hardware, much better than the old stuff. So once I get the drawer sides finished and cleaned up, I'm still not 100% certain what I'm going to do. I might go and do some like floral stamping on the side. That way it doesn't take up too much of the space in here, because sometimes they get stuck, especially when there's so many layers of paint. And we know this thing had so many layers of paint. So I think that's the only thing that I'm going to do to change this, is just clean up the drawer sides, do something pretty on those. I need to clean out the drawers because now I have sanding dust in them from drilling out the back side of the hole so that my hardware would fit in. So once that gets done, I actually am leaving it's like a cream, like a buttercream yellow on the inside of the drawers. I'm fine with that. I don't want to add any more paint, and you guys know I'm not removing that paint that is inside there. It was too much for the outside. It can be cleaned out really easily with the wipe of a damp cloth, so it's actually nice that the paint's in there. Oh my, it's loud. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this. This was so much fun getting these guys on here. This is my first on a piece of furniture, and I'm thrilled with it. Oh, I will say I might go through and touch these guys up just a little bit more because I can see them more than I would like to. Sometimes in certain light, I can see them more than I would like to. So yeah, these old hardware holes are, I mean, they're there. And I wanted wood on these, so I just went with it, and then it's fine. I'll fix them. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for following along, and I'll see you guys next time.